I still remember the day my son took his first kick on the soccer field. He was just 5, barely able to tie his own cleats, but the fire in his eyes when he scored his first goal, it lit something inside me that I thought had long burned out. My dream of becoming a professional soccer player had died years ago, smothered by my parents' obsession with stability and real careers. But seeing my son out there, chasing the dream I never got to, God, it made me feel alive. He loved. The sport, at least, he did at the beginning. We signed him up for the best soccer school in the state, and my wife, Emma, was fully on board. She didn't work. She didn't need to. I made sure we had everything we could ever want. She handled our home, and she took on the role of driving him to practice and games while I built my business empire. We were a team, or so I thought. By the time he was 12, coaches were calling him a natural talent with professional potential. Scouts whispered that we could be looking at scholarships, maybe even a shot at something bigger if he kept his focus. My chest swelled with pride every time his name echoed from the stands. That pride kept me working late nights and early mornings, all for him. I thought we were on the same page, until the day he sat me down and shattered everything. He came into my office, clutching a water bottle in his hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. His eyes, red and swollen, stared at the floor. "I don't want to play soccer anymore," he muttered. I blinked. "What? You love soccer. You're amazing at it. What's going on?" He tightened his grip on the bottle. "I hate it. I hate the practices. I hate the coach. I'm done, Dad. Don't make me go back." I didn't understand. Just a week ago, he was rambling on about Cristiano Ronaldo and how he wanted to be the next big thing. I tried reasoning with him. "We can switch clubs if you're unhappy. Maybe a new coach, new team." "No!" His voice cracked. And then he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I was confused and frustrated. This wasn't like him. He wasn't the kind of kid who quit when things got tough. I decided to talk to Emma. She'd know what was going on. She always did. I found her in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. "Hey, have you noticed anything weird with our son lately?" I asked, leaning against the counter. She didn't look up. "He's been moody, but you know how kids his age are. This is different. He says he hates soccer now, doesn't want to play anymore." Emma finally turned to face me, her eyes searching mine like she was measuring how much to say. "I don't know what's going on. After his last practice, he came out of the locker room crying. He wouldn't tell me why." Her voice trembled just enough to make me wonder if she was hiding something, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just worried about him like I was. For the next week, the tension in the house was unbearable. My son barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was short and bitter. I figured he needed time to cool down, so I gave him space. I should have pressed harder. I should have seen it coming. One night, while Emma was in the kitchen preparing dinner, my son knocked on my office door. His eyes were bloodshot again, and this time tears streamed down his face. "What is it, buddy?" I asked, my voice softening. He didn't speak right away. He just stood there, crying like he was carrying the weight of the world. Finally, he whispered, "I saw her, Dad. I saw Mom in the coach's office. They were kissing." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. "What do you mean you saw them kissing?" "I went back to grab my water bottle after practice," he choked out. "I saw her with him, Dad. That's why I don't want to go back. I can't." He broke down into sobs. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tightly as he cried. My mind was spinning, torn between comforting my son and processing what he'd just said. My wife, the woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with, was cheating on me, with our son's coach. "Go to your room," I told him, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'll take care of this." As soon as he was out of sight, I walked into the kitchen where Emma was slicing vegetables like it was any other day. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment, wondering how someone so familiar could suddenly feel like a stranger. "With the coach?" I asked, my voice cold and sharp. Her hand froze mid-slice. Slowly, she turned to face me. "How did you find out?" She whispered, like she wasn't even going to deny it. "It doesn't matter how," I said. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our son. Do you even realize what you've done to him?" Her eyes darkened. "I'm not the only one who's guilty here," she said, her voice rising. "You forgot about me, about us. You were so obsessed with your business and making our son your perfect little project. I was just the woman in the background, the one you only noticed when you needed something. Well, I got tired of waiting to be seen." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the rage boiling inside me. "Then you should have talked to me, not destroyed our family." Her jaw tightened. "You want a divorce? Fine. I won't fight it. I'm done living like this." The way she said it, so calm, so indifferent, hurt more than the betrayal itself. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She had already made peace with burning everything down. And that's when I knew this wasn't going to end peacefully. It was going to be war. The divorce proceedings began like a quiet storm. No thunder, no lightning, just an eerie calm that made you feel like the worst was yet to come. Emma and I agreed to keep things civil, or at least that's what I thought. For the sake of our son, I told myself. He didn't need to see his parents rip each other apart. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't end smoothly. You can't just rip out someone's heart and expect them to shake hands and walk away. The betrayal sat like a weight on my chest, suffocating me every time I saw her in the same room. Her face, once the image of love and comfort, was now a mask I couldn't stand to look at. My mind replayed everything over and over. Her with the coach, my son's tear-streaked face, the way she so easily admitted to the affair. I wanted to scream, break something, maybe even punch the walls, but I kept my composure. For now. The first court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. It was a gray, rainy day, the kind that fit the mood perfectly. I wore my best suit, a symbol of control, of a man who wasn't falling apart, even though on the inside I was barely holding it together. Emma showed up in a black dress, looking more like she was attending a funeral than a divorce hearing. Maybe she was mourning the life we once had. Or maybe she just knew how to play the game. I wanted to be reasonable. I really did. I wasn't going to leave her destitute. She was the mother of my child, after all. But custody was non-negotiable. My son had already seen too much, and the last thing he needed was to be stuck in the middle of this mess. I told my lawyer, "We're fighting for full custody. She can have weekends, but he's staying with me." At first, she didn't push back. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could settle this quietly. But then came the press. I should have seen it coming. My family was well known in the community. My business success had landed me in magazines, and our son's promising soccer career had drawn attention from local news outlets. The rumors of our split leaked faster than I could contain them, and soon reporters were waiting outside the courthouse, cameras flashing like vultures circling a fresh carcass. The first few days, Emma kept her head down, ignoring the questions they hurled at her. I figured she was embarrassed, ashamed of what she'd done. But then, after one particularly tense hearing about financial assets, something in her snapped. When we walked out of the courthouse that day, a reporter shouted, "Emma, why are you divorcing him? What happened?" She stopped dead in her tracks, turned to face the cameras and smiled, a wicked, practiced smile that sent a chill down my spine. "You want to know why we're getting divorced?" she said, her voice steady and clear. "Because he's a tyrant. He kept me trapped at home, controlled every part of my life, and treated me like a prisoner. He's a terrible husband and an even worse father. This divorce was inevitable. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My jaw tightened, my fists clenched, and for a split second I considered walking up to her and shouting the truth for everyone to hear, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, as the reporters ate up her lies like candy. By the time I got home that night, my phone was blowing up with messages, friends, business partners, even my mother, all asking what the hell was going on. The local news had already picked up her statement, twisting it into a narrative where I was the villain. The successful businessman who worked too much, neglected his wife, and drove her into the arms of another man. I stared at the TV in disbelief as a talking head dissected our marriage like it was some kind of soap opera. They speculated about my controlling behavior, wondered if I had driven her to cheat, and debated whether I deserved full custody of my son. Emma's plan was genius, really. By playing the victim, she'd shifted the blame entirely onto me. She was no longer the cheating wife. She was the poor, mistreated woman who had been forced into an affair because her husband was an emotional tyrant. And the worst part? People believed her. I wanted to fix it, to release a statement, call a press conference, do something to clear my name, but my lawyer warned me against it. The more you engage, the worse it'll get, he said. Let it blow over. The court will see the truth, even if the public doesn't. I tried to listen. I tried to stay calm. But every time I saw another headline, or heard another whisper about what a monster I was, the rage inside me grew. This wasn't just about the divorce anymore. This was about my reputation, my son, and everything I had worked for. She wasn't just trying to ruin me financially, she was trying to destroy my entire identity. The final hearing was brutal. Emma's lawyer painted me as a cold, distant workaholic who had neglected his family, while Emma sobbed quietly into a tissue. They brought up old arguments, twisted private moments, and made me look like the villain she had crafted in the media, but I wasn't going to lose my son. Not to her. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke directly to the judge, my voice calm but firm. I've done everything I can to give my son a good life. I built my business to provide for him. I've supported him in his dreams, even when they weren't my own. My son deserves stability, and right now, I'm the only one who can give that to him. The judge saw through Emma's performance. Or at least I hoped he did. The custody decision was delayed, but I left that courtroom knowing one thing. I wasn't done fighting. But the rage still burned. The humiliation, the betrayal, the lies. Emma had turned me into the bad guy, and she was walking away with sympathy, freedom, and half of everything I had built. I couldn't let her win. Not like this. I sat in my car outside the courthouse that day, staring at the steering wheel as the rain pounded against the windshield. My mind raced, filled with thoughts of revenge. I didn't want justice. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt. I wanted her to suffer the way she had made me suffer. That's when the plan started forming. I wasn't just going to win custody of my son. I was going to destroy her. Revenge isn't an impulse. It's a strategy. I knew that if I wanted to destroy Emma, I couldn't lash out like some angry, broken ex-husband. No. That's what she'd expect, and that's what the public would eat up. They'd love to see me lose control, to watch me unravel like the villain she'd painted me to be. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I would take my time, plan every move, and hit her where it hurt the most. I started with the coach. He was the catalyst for all of this, wasn't he? The man my wife had betrayed me with. He thought he could walk away unscathed, continue coaching other kids, and live his life like he hadn't helped destroy mine. But that was about to change. First, I hired a private investigator. Within 2 weeks, I had a file thicker than a phone book detailing every questionable decision he'd made since becoming a coach. Turns out my wife wasn't his first affair. Far from it. There were other mothers, other families, that had quietly transferred their kids to different clubs after he got a little too friendly with the moms in the stands. But here's the kicker. One of those moms had a teenage daughter who played on his team. The girl had filed a complaint about inappropriate behavior, but it had been buried by the club to avoid bad press. Bingo. I anonymously forwarded the file to the local news stations, parents in the soccer community, and even the athletic board that oversaw the league. Within 48 hours, the coach was suspended pending an investigation. His face was plastered across every news channel as reporters dug into the scandal. Parents pulled their kids from his team, the club distanced itself from him, and sponsors backed out of supporting any program associated with his name. He was finished, but that was just the appetizer. The main course was Emma. I needed to hit her where it would hurt the most, her public image. She had turned herself into the victim, the wronged wife who had escaped a controlling husband. People sympathized with her because they thought she'd suffered in silence. But what if they saw the real her, the woman who cheated on her husband, lied to the public, and betrayed her own son? I had the perfect weapon, my son's testimony. I didn't want to use him. God knows I didn't want to drag him through this any more than he already had been. But Emma had forced my hand when she went to the press and lied about me. I couldn't let her get away with it. So one night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I turned to him and said, "I need your help, buddy. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. But I think it's time people knew the truth." He hesitated, biting his lip like he always did when he was nervous. "What do you want me to do?" "Just tell them what you told me, about what you saw, about how it made you feel." The next day, I arranged an interview with a local journalist I trusted. My son sat down in front of the camera and, with tears in his eyes, recounted the day he walked into the coach's office and saw his mother kissing him. He talked about how it shattered his love for soccer, how he felt betrayed by the two people he trusted the most. His words were raw, emotional, and impossible to ignore. The interview aired that evening, and the fallout was immediate. Public opinion shifted overnight. The same people who had sympathized with Emma turned on her, calling her a liar, a cheat, and a bad mother. Social media exploded with hate, and by the end of the week, she had shut down all her accounts. Reporters camped outside her house, but this time, they weren't there to praise her. They wanted answers, and she didn't have any. But I wasn't done. The next move was financial. During the divorce proceedings, Emma had been awarded a significant portion of my assets, including a vacation home in Florida and a hefty monthly alimony payment. But thanks to my lawyer and a few well-placed contacts, I discovered a loophole. The terms of our divorce settlement included a morality clause. Essentially, if either party engaged in behavior that could damage the family's reputation, the financial agreement could be renegotiated. Her public affair with the coach was more than enough to trigger the clause. I filed a motion to revoke her alimony and reclaim the vacation home, citing the damage she had done to our family's name. It wasn't an easy fight, but after weeks of back and forth in court, the judge ruled in my favor. Emma lost everything. She was forced to move into a small apartment downtown, far from the luxurious lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The coach, disgraced and unemployed, was nowhere to be found. Rumor had it, he had skipped town to avoid the legal mess he was drowning. And for a brief moment, I felt victorious. I had taken back everything she tried to steal from me. I had exposed her lies, destroyed her lover, and reclaimed my reputation. But the satisfaction didn't last long. One night, after putting my son to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. There we were, me, Emma, and our son, smiling like we had the perfect life. I used to believe in those smiles. I used to think they meant something. But now, they were just reminders of everything I had lost. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the burn in my throat doing little to dull the ache in my chest. Was this what victory felt like? Empty? Emma's life was in ruins, but so was mine. I had become the man I never wanted to be, cold, bitter, and consumed by revenge. My son, despite being on my side, had suffered the most. He lost his love for soccer, his trust in his mother, and the innocence that comes with being a child. I couldn't give him that back. No amount of revenge could fix what had been broken. I finished my drink and set the glass down, the sound echoing through the silent room. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from my lawyer. The final custody ruling had come in. Full custody granted to me. Emma would get supervised visitation. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was numb. I had won, but at what cost? My son had a broken family, and I had a heart full of bitterness. Emma wasn't the only one who had lost everything. I had, too. The truth is, when you let revenge consume you, it doesn't just destroy your enemies, it destroys you too. As I sat there in the dim light of the living room, I realized that I hadn't just lost my wife. I had lost the man I used to be, and no amount of revenge could ever bring him back.